Lead and Feel.
Spotlight as a holy grail. Do you really need to be in a spotlight, like even all the time when you are a leader? In this episode, I will be discussing a few spectrums of leadership styles, from the quiet one versus the loud one, and so to speak, on stage and backstage leadership style, leadership preferences, and leadership setup, so to speak. So, I already talked about a bit with regards to different leadership types I've seen or I aspire to be or I used to look up to. If you haven't heard that episode, please check it out later. It's at the episode 1, the very first one after the intro. There, I mentioned that when I was younger, starting my professional career, I defined leaders as being these charismatic, easygoing, loud, salesy personalities people. And over time, I started to observe and notice different styles of managing and leading the teams. Oftentimes, people in the beginning of their work life, they aspire to become the manager, the leader. Or at least that was my case. It sounded so cool and nice for the ego. You get to present on the stage, show fancy graphs, get nice applause, recognition from the audience, and of course, you get to give orders and delegate, and you get to have people to do the work for you. Isn't it fucking awesome and perfect? Well, that was me. That was my line of thinking back then as well. And it sounded cool, right? I'm a manager. It's so cool to say it out loud to the rest of the people. Oh my god, yes, my ego was out there to the fullest. Boasting with pride and self-admiration and love, so to speak. And well, that's also the Ethiopian side of it. Very much orientated on so-called external side of management, right? The external PR, so to speak. So I would say the onstage leadership is the so-called red force, so the red color in terms of personality, driving people, motivating them, bringing results, showing and inspiring on a direct and explicit level, right? Also to the outside world, to the outside of your team. And very straightforward, very direct, with this big dominant energy. I'm not saying it's bad or anything, right? It's just that this is kind of the onstage thing that is really visible out there, and the rest of the organization or the rest of the people outside of the team, family, household, they see this thing as well. And however, the huge work in the meantime, very much often unnoticed, happens behind the scene, I believe, orchestrating all the other functions, tasks, so that the show, so-called the stage performance, can go on. That immediately brings me to the classic, yet such a great example of a theater performance. Director directs the final performance, but for the performance to be a success, there are so many other leaders, not smaller, not bigger, yet so much crucial and so important as well, who also make the magic happen. One responsible for the lighting team, one for the orchestra, one for the sound engineers. And we rarely get to know their name, right? We rarely get to remember the name, let alone faces. But the stage would not come to fruition if it wasn't for them. So I guess the conclusion, if there can be any conclusion out of it, now I'm just thinking, but in the end, what gets me to think is that, as always, it's all about the balance. I would say that it's a combination of loud and quiet that results in the performance necessary to lead successfully an organization, your family, your club, your household over the long term. And speaking of the extremes, I can't forget those leaders that I saw in my previous workplaces where they were all about the external image, right? So much focus on the external reputation, knowing who they need to drink with, having a coffee, a chit chat, who they need to sell their ideas or keep pushing for the budget or a buy-in. Big promises, big words, and very often an unhappy department. And then whenever I heard those stories or whenever I heard such leaders, those loud on-stage leaders boasting about the results, leadership team usually, or people, their audience, would usually be convinced that everything looked great and sounded great. But actually, was it? I guess the extreme way of managing and leadership team being only focused on results, on the external images, and not on the health of the team, not on the sustainability of the decisions, or not about small little things, incremental changes that they don't really look amazing and impressive to the outside world, they actually are worth as much as the big numbers out there on the graphs. So I think only if you look at the short-term gains, nice looking stuff, and very convincing, very hypnotic stories, I would say it's quite a short-term strategy and very tempting to follow, obviously, right? If something brings you the result tomorrow, you just go for it, even though the long-term result out of it, the consequence might not be so great. But hey, tomorrow you can boast and show off to the rest that you've made an impact or you've made a success. So for me, building trust, empowering people, letting them fail and learn, admit to make mistakes publicly, that takes time, courage, and no ego or little ego, or at least working on having no ego while making decisions, while communicating those decisions, while having people on board and letting them follow you. Speaking of ego, super often, I think in every workplace you get to meet at least one such a person. Those big, loud leaders seem to have quite some narcissist traits. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm far from diagnosing people. However, I think we all tend to do it anyways and discuss it with our friends, I believe. But when I read from even Wikipedia, I know it's not the most trustworthy and serious source, but then when I read it, it's like, oh my god, we've been there, we've seen that. So let me just read it quickly. Narcissist leadership is a leadership style in which the leader is only interested in himself or herself. Their priority is themselves at the expense of their people or group members. This leader exhibits the characteristics of a narcissist: arrogance, dominance, and hostility. So yeah, I bet you've been there, you've seen it. Maybe one of your managers used to be narcissist. Maybe one of your team members had these traits as well, and you were triggered big time by this behavior. A leader who promises you certain things, but not because he or she cares, but because it will whet his ego, that he is such a great leader, or because his performance bonus will be appointed to him because he just gave you a favor. So yeah, unfortunately, narcissist leaders, or actually leader wannabes, can have these hypnotic traits, right? Where they get you on board, convince you about the idea, and in no time you are there, completely paralyzed, completely hypnotic, and nodding your face. Any question, any doubt you might have is simply responded with lots of confidence, dominance, that is all being taken care of, and there's no room for discussion. Seems like you can't really participate in the conversation, right? You just need to listen, give the attention to the person, and keep on nodding. Where am I getting at? You might wonder, and I'm also wondering too. Well, first of all, you may already sense that I have somewhat an aversion towards narcissist leaders or overall to narcissist personalities. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, there are many out there. They act selfish, constantly manipulating, and you feel like you are acting under their spell. And it's all about them, right? All about the attention to them. It's all about how amazing they are, and you have to just listen to them. Anyways, I'll park here. I'll have a beautiful episode lined up in the near future, where I'll be discussing the anti-leaders. A bit of a parody as well. So getting back to the topic, on stage and backstage. Again, another generic statement, but it's really nice and important to keep reminding ourselves no size fits all. And I think it's true in my eyes also in this situation. Your style when managing people, your own life, your own household, family will need to maneuver between those two extremities. And of course, every one of us has their preferred way due to our personality, our nature, our upbringing, our past history, our experience. And in some situations, you would go to your default behavior, default responses. However, in some situations, I believe, could require you to practice the other side too. For example, take the maturity or seniority of your team. When your team is pretty young or not fully experienced, they would need more of a directional and maybe even dictational way of being managed, where things are being clear and straightforward. You need to be out there, present to them and to the rest of the organization, basically just to keep your horses, and on the short leash, so to speak, and just to keep on pushing them in the direction you want. Once they gain maturity and seniority and they know more or less what is expected from them, maybe then you can a little bit step back. And if you tend to be the quiet person anyways, even if you're managing a young team, such teams might not be able to trust you, might not be able to follow you, and might also just override you, or maybe they will just follow someone who is louder than you in your authority, and the place in your team, your place, will be a little bit under the question. I remember a couple of times I tend to sit back a little bit just to give space to my team members, and also because I think sometimes it was hard for me to step in, so to speak, and I could easily see that if a team is not managed and if there are many young people, fresh graduates, young professionals, still not really understanding how to manage their emotions or how to resolve conflicts, if you don't step in on time and you don't show yourself as a leader, things can go into anarchy mode, and then at some point you might lose respect, you might lose authority, and you will not get shit done. However, on the other side, senior and self-steering team does not need another steering, right? They just need a guidance from the distance and intervening if necessary, but I would say a little bit from the back, right? So that's where I think backstage leadership is more than welcome, where you basically observe and you monitor stuff from the distance, and then you just give coaching here and there, but you definitely get your team to be autonomous from the start to the end. So, nevertheless, it seems like only the on-stage leaders, the loud ones, are the ones to become, and the ones who get a reputation, nice press, nice PR. Everyone wants to be that loud leader, or everyone sees a leader just in this way, right? As if it's the only way to lead a team, right? While being quiet will set you to failure. While being quiet is lame and not assertive. Fortunately, it's not the case, and I will keep on repeating all over again. You just gotta be you. Be aware of your flaws and strengths, and keep on leveraging them. Keep on leveraging on your strengths, on what comes natural to you, and keep on working on what doesn't come naturally to you, but sometimes is very much needed in a situation. So if you tend to be an extroverted one, make sure you also focus on building relationships, establishing trust, and last but not least, the listening skills. And if you tend to be more of an introverted person, especially in the leading roles, make sure you also focus and practice, your presentation skills, your negotiation skills, and a bit of more assertiveness here and there. When I read the book called Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain, I was relieved, I must say. I always thought I need to push myself and always have something to say in the meetings, also push for my agenda and my opinion, and basically have something always to say. It was killing me and it was draining my energy. That book and overall my journey to be more relaxed about who I am, what strengths I have, what gives me energy, what drains me my energy, helped me connect to my own style of leadership, and more of a quieter one, a nurturing one, and definitely a backstage one. Don't get me wrong, for example, I love being on the stage, give presentations. Also here in the podcast, I love to claim my space and get some audience. I love to boast about my teams and the results. And I love to be that charismatic actress on the stage owning the show. But I think now what gives me more satisfaction, especially in the work environment, is helping my teammates prepare for the presentation, cheering up for them, especially in case they have a stage fright, and clapping for their presentation and clapping for the results. Basically, the shit from the spotlight comes from me, which I can direct and pass it on to my team members. Feeling like a mama, right? Proud of their offsprings, taking another jump in their growth, having a small tear here and there from being emotional about it, and being present and observing that someone else is growing and is overcoming their insecurities. So or simply just watching your team arrive to a solution to the problem on their own, letting them believe it was them. And actually, usually it is them, right? You don't have to manipulate or anything. You were just gently there guiding and pointing in the direction and subtly asking certain questions. Yes, it takes some patience and persistence. Some stuff doesn't come overnight. Some behavior is not kicking in, so to speak, in a moment, within a second. However, it pays off, right? I think the outcome is what every leader desires: a self-steering, reliable, and autonomous team that is not afraid of taking decisions or risks. And you were just there seeing how the team is pushing forward and you're all in it together. So to conclude, great captains or leaders, however you call them or call yourself, need to play two parts, right? Two main parts: the front stage and the backstage roles of the backstage role of the leadership. And over a lifetime, depending on the situations in life, at work, at home, outside home, you have to keep on navigating those two extremities, extreme polarities. Where do you have to intervene? Where do you have to back off? And where you have to be involved in certain situations. So I'm curious to hear what your default or tendency is. Do you have any leaders, examples that you aspire to and are aspiring to you, either the quiet ones or the loud ones? Where was it needed to be the loud one in your case? Where did you need to step back that actually made a bigger impact than be out there fully engaged? Maybe you can also think of someone who is an anti-leader, who is kind of a big anti-definition of who the leader is to you, because I believe we'll learn a lot, even they don't know it, from those people who also suck at it. More about it in the coming episodes too. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in, for staying until the end of episode, I hope, and have a lovely evening or the day ahead, and see you next time. Bye bye.